Hi, I'm John Terzak, and today I'm going to answer the question, how to make pot roast. That is a really loaded question because this isn't how to make the pot roast. This is how to make one of a couple of hundred probably ways to make pot roast perfectly and correctly. This is my favorite version, and I'm going to make it with beef brisket, which we have down here. This is kind of like a small to medium-sized brisket. And probably going to cook this in the oven for 3 hours, 4 hours, 4.5 hours, 5 hours. So I would definitely allow a lot of time. But this is going to be a super elapsed video, of course. And not only are we going to elapse it till when I take it out of the oven in 3, 4, 5 hours, but then we're going to let it cool overnight before we cut it. And we're going to remove all the fat from the stock that we made when we braised it in the oven, and make the juice and finish it. So it's a one-day project if you want to do it comfortably, okay? So we're going to start off by keeping this really simple. First, understand that this is not a browned pot roast. This is what I would call a white pot roast, which means nothing is being browned that goes into this. It's not good, that's not bad, it's just the way it is, and it will turn out absolutely delicious. So we're going to start by putting the brisket in the pan I'm going to use to braise it in, and I'm going to dump a couple of cups of garlic in there. Now I'm putting whole garlic in there because in the final analysis I'm going to give you 2 versions of this on a plate when this is all done. One of them is going to include using the whole garlic cloves as part of the vegetable that's served with it, along with celery, carrots, and onions. And I got about 3.5 quarts of vegetables there. And I'm going to add some dried leaf thyme, a tablespoon or 2. Same thing with dried oregano. Now you can put whatever you want in here. I'm just showing you some of my choices. I probably made this at least a couple of hundred times over the years. I've been playing around with this recipe for about 30 years. Some bay leaves, and I got basil I put in there. So you got a couple tablespoons of everything. And I'm going to put a little bit of pepper in there. Not too much, keeping in mind that we're going to be reducing this juice into more of a concentrated sauce-like consistency to put over the finished product. We don't want to put salt in here or too much pepper because it'll get peppery as it reduces. And I'm going to put a couple of tablespoons of dried leaf tarragon in here also. Then we're going to use water. How much water? Depends how big your brisket is, how big your braising pan is. You want this at least 3/4 of the way submerged. I'm going to put about 8 ounces of tomato paste into the water and mix it in. You'll notice that the startup part of this project is easy. The ingredients are simple and very traditional in a lot of ways. So the funny thing about pot roast is it's not actually roasted per se, but there's hundreds of versions that are all accurate and good, and they're called pot roast, but nothing is really roasted, which is kind of funny. But there's a lot of names that this goes under. This goes under the name of pot roast, braised brisket, pot-au-feu de Boeuf, which would be my reference term that I would use for this, which in French means a whole bunch of stuff thrown into a pot with some aromatics and cooked. And I'm going to add the water. And I'm going to add a little more water. There we go. Now it's submerged right now, and that's fine. Now, I could cook this completely on top of the stove, but for right now, we're going to put it on top of the stove to bring it up to a simmer before we put it in the oven. I'll come back to you in a few minutes after this comes up to a simmer. We'll pop it in the oven, that's it. So I'll be back in a few minutes. It's been about 30 minutes on top of the stove, coming to a simmer. The pot roast looks good. I'm going to put it in the oven put a sealed top on top of it. And I'm going to come back and nursemaid this over the next few hours. And when it's tender enough to eat and completely cooked. Now, let me re-emphasize to you, when you're making braised brisket or boiled brisket, it has to be cooked completely until it's tender enough to eat. If it isn't, it will be chewy and no one will want to eat it. So I've made the mistake of not cooking this enough and cooling it off and going to clean it, and then I heated up a piece one day and it was chewy and I had to recook it. So, I mean, it happened once every 200 times, right? So, anyway, you want to make sure it's tender enough to eat before you take it out. I'll bring you back. When this is done, I'll tell you how long it was in there. It's been about 30 minutes on top of the stove right now, so I'll see you in about 3 hours. Okay, the brisket has been braising for 4 hours. About 2 hours into it, I looked at it about 4 or 5 times, kept checking it. It's done now. But I added about 2 or 3 cups of cold water to it. It's starting to need a little more water. No big deal. So we're going to get it out, and we're going to set the sauce, the veg, and the brisket up to cool off. And then tomorrow, when the brisket is cold, I'm going to show you how to clean this brisket for perfect pieces. First, let's get the pot roast out. The pot roast that never roasted, that one. Okay, there, take a look at that bad boy. If you can see it, which you probably can't, but you're about to see it. As I'm yanking this guy out of here. And I'm going to show you how I know it's done. I told you earlier how important it was that this is cooked all the way. Now, before I get around to straining this, let's just take a closer look at this brisket. Oh, let's look at this. This is the meat. You see how I can pull it, how soft it is? Same thing over here. Remember, the skinnier part of the brisket is going to be done before this side is. So this is the side that you really want to check to make sure. And there you have it, see? It's just coming out of there. It's coming apart. And that's what you're looking for. Okay, so this, we're going to put in the fridge overnight. It gets nice and cold. I'm going to show you how to clean that thing and put it into good portions. Now, we're going to strain this juice. All right, that's the end of that. And we're going to let this settle a little bit. After it settles, I'm going to take all this vegetable and I'm going to put it on this sheet pan. We're going to let it cool overnight also. And the juice, I'll probably just leave it in this pot and store it in the fridge overnight, because we're going to reduce this juice tomorrow to the amount of juice that we need. We want to match up the amount of finished reduced juice with the amount of brisket portions that we have. So we have just the right amount of juice for the amount of brisket that we have. That way we're getting the maximum value out of the whole reducing process. Let's see here. I'm going to let this drain for about 10 minutes while I do some cleaning up in here today. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll finish this off. All right, I'm back. First thing in the morning to finish this pot roast. It's cold. The pot roast is nice and cold. I want to show you how to cut that whole brisket up in real time. And the braising liquid right here as you can see, has the fat that I told you would be on it. And I'm going to remove that fat from there. And that's part of the benefits of doing this over a course of 2 days, because you don't want your braising liquid to be fatty. A little bit of fat's okay, but you don't need any excess like this. So, very important about how we manage this now. I'm going to use this to poach the marrow bones, which I have right here, which are 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches, 1.75 inches cut femur bones from beef. I'm going to take a little bit of this juice and put it on it like that. I'm going to pop these in the oven, covered up, and that is going to be poached marrow that's going to be served with it. We're going to take that juice out of here and add it back to this when we're done poaching the marrow bones. The marrow bones is something that you can poach ahead of time, and it's something that you can include or not include in your final preparation, presentation, or whatever. Next, we're going to cut some cabbage up and braise it with this in the oven, and also end up taking that juice from that cabbage and putting it back in this juice later. So let's get the cabbage cut up and into the oven. All by itself. Now you want to leave this stem in, the cabbage, at this point, because you want your wedges of cabbage on your finished plate to have something to hold them together, so you don't end up with a million pieces of cabbage, and you'll be able to identify the cabbage on the plate for your final presentation. So, again, as you know, I'm giving you two versions of this. The refined version, which the cabbage is part of, and then I'm going to give you the version that is the reduced juice with the brisket and the vegetables that are still in the refrigerator from yesterday that we braised the brisket in. Let's get the rest of this cabbage in, because I'm going to set this up family style on a large platter. So we're going to use a good chunk of this entire head of cabbage. This is like dinner for 6 to 8, or you can make them individually. This by itself, I'm going to put a little bit of lemon in here. Squeeze lemon on it, just put the whole lemon in there. I'm going to put some salt, not much, because don't forget this is part of the braising liquid, and we can adjust the final level of salt near the end of that after it's reduced. Now we're going to take some of this braising liquid, put it over the top. Boom. And I'm going to plastic wrap this and seal it in aluminum foil both. So I have it really sealed up good. Cover it with a sheet of foil. Fold the foil on there in a way that if you want it, when it's time to go back in and test the cabbage, you don't have to rip the foil off and end up putting another sheet on it. Okay, so that's sealed up and folded up nice. I'm going to pop this in the oven. And the marrow is going to take about 30 minutes at about 300 degrees. It's not something you want to cook fast because you don't want to melt all the marrow inside. You just want to soften it enough so you can put a knife in there and spread it on your French red while you're eating this pot roast. And of course get a little bit of the flavor out of that marrow from that juice and back into this. So I'm going to put this on the stove to begin, bring to a boil, and after it's boiling we're going to blanch the vegetables that I'm going to serve this with in it. Carrots, celery, mushroom caps, small potatoes, That's it. Now we're going to wait, and I'm going to show you how to cut the brisket now. Cutting up the brisket. I'm going to cut this brisket up, and I'm going to put it directly into the pan that we're going to end up heating this whole dish up in later before we get it on a platter. Okay, this brisket is divided into two halves. You got the flat, thin part, and then you got the thicker, heavier part, okay? I'm going to cut that right in half to begin with. And we're going to be careful about getting the fat off of these. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can slice this. You want a nice thick slice. And then you can trim each individual slice with its excess fat. Or you can clean. We just put this right inside the pan there. Or you can try to clean it all off before you slice it. And depends on the brisket. Some are a lot more fattier than others. And the other question is, how much fat do you want on your slices of brisket when you give it to whoever's going to eat it? Of course, if you're serving this in a restaurant, you might not want any of it because people will complain about that. But some people like a little bit of the brisket fat on there. I got most of it off right there. So there's a little bit here. Let me get that off right there. Just line that up in the pan. Now this one is a little bit different. You want to cut it this way. Now the other piece, we cut that way. So when you get to this end, you're cutting it against a different thread of the grain, okay? So this one has more fat in the middle, and I'm going to show you how I normally cut that fat right out. Okay, like this piece here, for example, literally just cut it out like that. Got a little bit of fat on the outside here, not much. And I'm going to cut this little middle section out. Some people would prefer to leave that in to eat it, but I normally don't serve it to people like that. See, this one I'm cutting the fat off of each slice as I go along, rather than like I did with the other half when I trimmed all the fat off for the most part. This one, there's a little bit of fat here. But this is in real time. You're seeing how long it takes to clean the entire brisket, which isn't that long, really. I think that piece, we're going to leave that little piece of fat in that one. And trimming. Trimming, trimming. This one we're going to cut that fat out. Right there. And there. All these little pieces are as good as any of the other ones, so I would definitely include them in. It's a little bit like a roast turkey. All the meat is good. Sometimes that fat tries to sneak past you. You have to be a little careful to make sure you get it all. And I'm going to take this piece of fat out of the middle here. And there's a big chunk on the end here. Let me get rid of that too. There you go. There's your one entire whole brisket. So it was a small to medium-sized brisket to begin with. But you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. You got dinner here for 6 to 8 people. This stuff, normally what I do is I'll brown it in the oven, render some of the fat off of this trim, and add it to my stock pot if I happen to have one around. If I don't, I'll freeze this, which is what I'm going to do with this. And next time I make a stock pot, I'll take it out and add it to it. So there you go. There's the trimming of the brisket. And then next we're going to check up on the marrow and the cabbage. Okay, I'm going to take a peek at the marrow. It's been about 30 minutes. I looked at it a couple times already, and it's done enough for me right now. So I'm going to take it out because we're going to hold it at that state until such time as we're ready to put it on the plate with the pot roast later. So I'm going to drain the juice off the marrow and put it back into the boiling braising liquid here. We're going to keep these marrow bones warm over here, and we'll get back to those a little later. Now, one of the things that's really important to understand about getting your vegetables ready, we're assuming that this is the version, the more refined version, if you will, that includes new, fresh vegetables added to your finished pot roast. So, assuming we're doing that, and not to be confused with the provincial style, I've been boiling the potatoes in the juice, which I would do either way, because even if I wasn't making another version beyond the country provincial style, I would still want to add some mushrooms and potatoes to it anyway, and the cabbage. But those are all options for you, okay? So the potatoes are close enough to be done for me to blanch the mushrooms. And I'm going to put the carrots in here too. This is going to take about 10 minutes to cook all those. I'm going to take all the veg and set them over here, separated after they're blanched. And they're being staged for the final reheating process. In other words, I'm going to show you how to take this whole pot roast dish and set it up so that all you have to do is turn it on and heat it up and serve it when your guests come over or whoever you're going to serve it to. So I'll be back in 10 minutes after those get cooked, and then we'll add the celery to it and remove those. Okay, it's been about 8-9 minutes. The carrots and the mushrooms have been poaching in liquid. It's been boiling away, and they're done. I tested them, and now I'm going to get them scooped out of there. And we're going to continue to reduce the juice. Now we're waiting on the cabbage to be cooked, and then we're going to put the entire package here together of this pot roast on a plate. Okay, now I'm going to throw the celery in here real quick for about a minute. Then I'll pull the celery out, set it over there, and when we come back, we're going to put this all together. Meanwhile, the juice is continuing to reduce because we're concentrating the flavor. And what we want to end up with is enough of that reduced braising liquid to accommodate 6 to 8 dinners. And that's it. See ya. Okay, celery, about 2 minutes in the boiling liquid, and it is out of there. And that's all you need. You got to get some nice green pigment coming out of that celery. And don't forget, all of these foods are going to be slightly reheated or made hot or very, very warm before you actually put them on a plate. So we'll be back to put this whole thing together in a few minutes. Okay, the final analysis, the final put together, the final assembly of the pot roast. It's been a day since we started this dish. The cabbage is cooked and it's tender enough to eat. I took it out about 15-20 minutes ago, and I took the juice that was in the cabbage, like I said I would, and I put it back into the braising liquid. And the braising liquid now is all reduced down. So this, we're going from about a gallon, maybe 5 quarts of liquid water that we started with, and we have maybe a quart of juice out of all of that. So let's start by putting some of the meat on both of these plates. So the home style version and the a little bit more upscale version. Home style, that looks like a dinner. This is exactly how we put it in. I warmed this up in a little bit of the braising liquid, as I did everything that's part of this dish is warmed up inside this braising liquid. So in some ways, these are both very home style versions, but one is a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more expensive than the other. Okay, let's go with that. And the veggies that I par blanched in all of the braising liquid as well. So let's start out with the country version, which is I added a couple of potatoes, I added a couple of mushrooms to this, and I added a piece of cabbage to this. And this is some of the vegetable that was part of, and I added a few pieces of bacon to this, which are all options. And then there is a single home-style version of the dinner. A little bit of parsley on there. And normally what I do is after I get these cabbages where I want, I cut that head piece out. Get rid of that because it's not that edible. I don't want anything on the plate that's not edible. This one needs a little bit more juice because this dish is about the juice in a big way. Okay, so there's your home-style version. And I'll add finally just a little pinch of tomato concassé to that plate. Now, a little bit more stylized version, if you will, where I'm going to even separate the vegetables on the platter so people can kind of pick and choose as they want. Let's get the roasted shallots that we roasted in the skins. Let's get some of them up there. Let's get the celery up there. This, of course, is your super presentation type deal for holidays and things like that. And this is absolutely wonderful. Mushrooms. Bacon. These are all nice additives. Of course, you can come up with your own additives on this in a number of ways. Okay, now let's get some parsley potatoes going. Heat them with a little bit of oil. Toss them around. A little bit of salt and pepper. And a lot of parsley. Chopped parsley, I'm going to roll them around in there. We're going to put our parsley potatoes down here. And we have a little bit of the tomato concassé, which we're going to squeeze some in over there, which is a nice little addition for this platter. And we have the beef marrow bones. Now, I'm assuming this is a down-home provincial version here of this, and I just pulled a bay leaf out of there. Now, can you add a bone on there? Yes. These marrows are nice and warm. They're nice and soft. You can go in there with a knife if you want. You can put one on there if you want. I think in our case, we're going to put these around this. That's an especially good one right there. And I think we have the lion's share here of what's going on this plate, except for the final juice, which I adjusted with salt and pepper. Now, as you can see, both of these dishes look good. And both of them have that total provincial, a little chopped parsley here on here too. Both of them have that total provincial look. This is a preparation that I have made a number of times, as in a couple of hundred. And again, I want to remind you, not a single thing in either one of these were ever really browned. So this is a white beef stock, white beef braising liquid, white beef dish, if you will, okay? There it is, pot-au-feu de Boeuf, pot roast, braised brisket, boiled beef, whatever you want to call it. If you get your teeth and tongue onto this, you're going to be very happy. Oops, the cabbage. Don't forget about the cabbage. This dish has so many different things on it, I forgot about it myself. Let's throw a little cabbage on there. And then I'll send you off with another exit. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Notice how I'm taking the roots off of this as I'm doing this. There you go. And just to top it off, let's put a little bit of olive oil in here for fun. All right, now we're finished. Now there's the pot roast, and sorry about that. But enjoy this thing if you ever get a chance to. You will love it. It's fabulous.